What's the probability of flipping a coin and getting heads 4 times in a row? So if you flip a coin, there's a 50% chance that you're going to get a heads. And if you wanted to do it the second time, you'd have to multiply it by the second time probability, which would also be 50%. And since it wants 4 times in a row, we're just going to have to do this 4 times. So 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16. So the probability would be 1 over 16, which is D.
I've been working on this super cool app called Takeoff, and it lets you win money studying for the SAT. It's in beta version right now, so click the link in my bio to sign up.
If you invested $20,000 in GameStop and it goes up by 1,500%, how much is it worth? So if you have an initial investment of $20,000, what you'd have to do is multiply it by the percentage that went up, but in decimal form. So to convert this into decimal form, you just have to move the decimal point over twice. So this is just 15, and 20,000 times 15 is $300,000. But as if you weren't rich enough, you still have to add on your initial investment, which was the $20,000. And if you add these two numbers up, you get $320,000. What is the length of the board cut in half? So what I like to do is take each of these components and do them separately. So 9 divided by 2 is just 4.5 feet. And 4.5 feet is the same thing as 4 feet and 6 inches because there are 12 inches in a foot. And we still have a 4 here. So 4 divided by 2 is just 2 inches. So we just have to add that over here. So 4 feet plus 6 inches plus 2 inches is 4 feet and 8 inches. We can solve this in 20 seconds just by remembering this one thing. So in a complete circle, all of the angles are always going to add up to 360 degrees. And there's already 240 degrees here. That means that 240 plus all of these x's have to add up to 360 degrees. So let's just count these x's. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 x's. And I'm going to add it with 240 because that has to equal 360 degrees. So if I subtract 240 from both sides, I get 10x is equal to 120. If I divide both sides by 10, I get x is equal to 12, which is C. What is the perimeter? So this problem looks pretty easy, but if you look closely, they don't give us this side length or this side length, which means that we're gonna have to find it. So since this side length here is 4, that means that this piece right here is also 4, which means that this line right here is just 20 minus 4, which is 16. And we can do the same logic for this side length. So since this is 4, that means that this is also 4, which means that this piece right here is just 10 minus 4, which is 6. So now we can just add up all the sides. So 4 plus 6, that's 10. 16 plus 4, that's 20. 10 plus 20 is 30. Plus 20 is 50. Plus 10 is 60. So the answer is C. What is the area of the shape below? So the first thing I'm going to do is just imagine that this is a complete rectangle, and the area of this rectangle is just length times width, which is 40. And now I'm going to have to take into account all of these little squares that I left out here. So the area of these squares is just length times width, which is x times x, which is just x squared. And since there are 4 of these, I'm going to have to put a 4 right here. So this is our final answer, which is B. Find the ratio of 2.5 to 4.5. So as you can see, all of our answer choices are written in whole numbers, which means that we're going to have to take both of these numbers and change it into whole numbers without changing the ratio itself. So since both of these numbers end in 0.5, that means that we can change them into whole numbers by multiplying them both by 2. So 2.5 times 2 is just 5, and 4.5 times 2 is just 9. So our ratio is 5 to 9, so the answer is B.
I'm working on this super cool app called Takeoff, and it lets you win money studying for the SAT. It's in beta version right now, so click the link in my bio to sign up.
Simplify the expression below. So I don't like square root, so let's get rid of that first. So the square root of 27 is equal to the square root of 9 times 3. And since 9 is a perfect square, we can just bring that on the outside. So this is equal to 3 times the square root of 3. So now let's rewrite this. So we have 8 over the square root of 16, which is just 4, plus 3 times the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. And since this is in the numerator and the denominator, we can just cancel these out. 8 over 4 is just 2. So we have plus 3, which is equal to 5. What is the units digit of 9 to the power of 209? So first of all, this number is so big you can't even put it in your calculator. Like you'll literally get an error message. But let's see if we can still solve this. So 9 to the 1 power is just 9. 9 squared is just 81. 9 to the 3rd power is just 729. And as you can see in the units digit, it goes from 9 to 1 to 9, and then it repeats like that forever. Okay? And as you can see, whenever we have an odd number, it goes to a 9. And every time we have an even power, it goes to a 1. Since 209 is an odd number, that means that it's going to end in a 9, which means the answer is D. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus dot 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 plus 50 equals what? So this problem is actually a lot easier than you might think. So I'm going to start out just by taking the first and the last number and adding those two together. So 1 plus 50 is just 51. And I'm going to take the second and second to last number, which would be 49, and add those two up. So 2 plus 49 is also just 51. So if you recognize the pattern, that's great. So now we have to see how many pairs there are. So since there are 50 numbers, that means that there are 25 pairs. So I take that and I multiply it by the sum of each of the pairs, which is 51, and I get 1275, which is C.
Chicken wing, hot dog and bologna, chicken and macaroni, chilling with my homies. Chicken wing, hot dog and bologna, chicken and macaroni, chilling with my homies.
A car travels in a figure 8 pattern around both circles in 10 seconds. How fast was the car moving? So a figure 8 pattern is just something that looks like this, which means that he went around both circles one time, and the distance around any circle is just the circumference 2 pi r, where r is the radius, and since the radius is 2, this is just equal to 4 pi. But he went around both circles, which means that we're gonna have to multiply this number by 2, which is 8 pi. So this is the distance around both the circles. And it's asking for the speed, and the speed is just distance over time. And distance is 8 pi, the time is 10 seconds, 8 pi over 10 is 2.5, so it's C. 40% of 80 is what percent of 160? So 40% is just 0.4. Of 80, you just multiply it together. So 0.4 times 80 is 32. And it's asking for the percentage of 160. So you take 32 and you divide it by 160. And we get 1 over 5, which is 0.2, which is 20%. Above. So there's a whole bunch of different ways we can divide this. I'm just going to choose this because I feel like it's the easiest. So now I'm just going to find the area of each of the rectangles, and the big rectangle is just 20 times 14, which is 280. So now we have the area of the big rectangle. We have to find this area right here, but we don't know this side length. But we do know that this whole thing is 20, this whole thing is 14, which means that x has to be 20 minus 14, which is 6. And to find the area of a rectangle, just 8 times 6, which is 48. If you add 280 and 48, then you'll get 328. Simplify the expression below. So it's actually really easy to multiply any two numbers that are already in scientific notation. You start out just by taking the first numbers and multiplying them together. So 2.2 times 3 is just 6.6. And then you want to look at these exponents up here. So we have a 5 and a 6, and you're just going to add them together. So 5 plus 6 is 11. So this is our final answer. So the answer is C.
If you guys are wondering what interface I'm using, it's called Maple Learn, and you can use it to do graphs, do calculus problems, and even note-taking. You can check it out using the link in my bio.
What is the function y? So the first thing I see here is that x to the minus 3 appears in the numerator and the denominator, so we could just cancel out like that. And since all of these have the same base, we could just add the exponents in the numerator. So 10 minus 9 is 1, and 1 plus 5 is 6. So this is just x to the 6th, and we still have an x to the 4th on the bottom. So since these also have the same base, we can just subtract their two exponents. So this is just x squared, so the answer is D.
The interface I'm using is called Maple Learn, and I'm just going to check my work really quick. So as you can see, it simplified the problem, and the answer was x squared, so we got it correct.
If the pattern continues, what will be the 101st number? Okay, so in this sequence, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers, and then it starts repeating. And every 5 numbers, we're going to have a 0. So what you want to do is you want to take 101 and divide it by 5. And in this case, we're interested in the remainder, not the value of this. So we get a remainder of 1, which means that it's one number after 0. So the answer is A. This is the value of 3x. Okay, so this problem looks a lot harder than it actually is. So we have 4 of these 2x's being added together. So that's just 4 times 2 to the x. And that is equal to 32. So if you just divide both sides by 4, we get 2 to the x is equal to 8. And how do we get 8 to kind of look like this? So we remember that 8 is just 2 to the power of 3. So 2 to the x is equal to 2 to the 3. So that means that these exponents have to be equal. But it's asking for the value of 3x, not just x. So you have to multiply this number by 3. So the answer is D.
It's also really important to check your work. So if you get the Maple Calculator app, you can actually just scan the problem. And not only does it give you the graph, but it also gives you the solutions.
You can solve this problem in like 20 seconds, just trust me. If the two diameters add up to 12, what is the total length of the darkened curve, which is this? So the first thing I'm going to do is just imagine that these are two complete circles. And to find the circumference of a circle, you use the formula 2 pi r, where r is the radius. In this case, it's written in the diameter, so this is just pi times d. And if we add these two circumferences up, we get pi d1 plus pi d2. And we can just factor out a pi, so this is just pi times d1 plus d2, and it gives us what d1 plus d2 is. They say the two diameters add up to 12. So this is just pi times 12, but since these are two half circles, we have to divide this number in half. So this is just 6 pi, which is B. AMC stock went from $5 per share to $19 per share. What percent did it go up? So all you have to do to find percent increase is take the larger number and subtract the smaller number. So 19 minus 5 is equal to 14. And then you're going to take this number and divide it by the original number, which was 5. So 14 divided by 5 is 2.8. And to convert this into a percentage, all you have to do is move the decimal point over twice, which is 280%, which is C. What is the units digit of 4 to the power of 854? So first of all, this number is so big you can't even put it in a calculator, but let's see if we can find some sort of pattern. So 4 to the 1 power is just 4, 4 squared is just 16, 4 to the 3rd power is just 64, 4 to the 4th power is 256. So as you can see in the ones digit, it goes from 4 to 6 to 4 to 6, and it repeats like that forever. And every time we have an odd power, it goes to a 4, and every time we have an even power, it goes to a 6. So since 854 is an even number, it's going to go to a 6, which means the answer is D. This is how you divide any number by 5 without using a calculator. So the first thing you want to do is double the number that they give you, and the easiest way to do that is just to double each digit. So 3 times 2 is 6, 4 times 2 is 8, 2 times 2 is 4, and 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, then you want to grab the decimal and move it over 1 point, and that's your answer. If y is 4 to the minus 2, then what is y to the y? So 4 to the minus 2 is the same thing as 1 over 4 squared, which we can rewrite as 1 over 16. And it wants y to the y, which is 4 to the minus 2, to y, which is also 1 over 16. And when we have exponents like this, all we have to do is multiply these two exponents together. So this is just equal to 4 to the minus 2 times 1 over 16, which is minus 1 over 8. So the answer is A. This one is a lot easier than you might think. So when we have an exponent and a root like this, the way to simplify it is just by taking the number in the square root, which is 16, and dividing it by the number that's out here, which is 4. So x to the 16 over 4 is just x to the 4. So now we just have to simplify this guy. So the 4th root of 81 is equal to 3 because 3 to the power of 4 is equal to 81. So if we take our two answers, we get 3x to the 4, which is A. Simplify 4 factorial over 3 factorial to the 3 factorial power. So if you're not familiar with factorials, it's basically a fancy way of writing this. So 4 factorial is just 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, and 3 factorial is just 3 times 2 times 1. So think about it like you're just counting down to 1. And it wants us to divide these two. So every number I see in the numerator and the denominator, I could just cancel out. So 3 and a 3, 2 and a 2, a 1 and a 1. So now we're just left with 4, and it wants 4 to the 3 factorial power. So 4 to the 3 factorial is just 4 to the 3 times 2 times 1. 3 times 2 times 1 is just 6, so the answer is C. You guys have been asking me to do this for a while. Rewrite the number below in scientific notation. So all you want to do is grab the decimal, and you want to move it over until you only have one number to the left. So I just moved it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and that means that our answer is 3.6 times 10 to the amount of times you moved, which was 5, so the answer is C.